response to risk research. So that is our group, and we are at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center. Who we are a group of researchers and clinicians and college students and coordinators and administrators, and we're all working together to work on studies for clinical high risk kids, adolescents showing signs of risk for psychosis and developing interventions. We're studying them and we're trying to intervene as early as possible to reduce worsening symptoms, and hopefully to really just encourage kids to have and give them all the skills to have the best life possible. That's what we do. That's who I am. I'm also here with my supervisor and the principal investigator of so many of our studies, Dr. Michelle Friedman-Yakubian. I'm going to have her introduce herself, and then I'm going to have Harini introduce herself too. She is going to share with us a little survey research that she's working on. And then we have Shira. She's a representative from Students with Psychosis. She's going to present at the very end, and I want her to introduce herself before we get too far into the presentation. So Michelle.
Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for spending your afternoon with us and joining us. I'm Michelle Friedman-Yakubian. I'm a clinical psychologist, and just really delighted to be talking with you all. We do a lot of work at our center related to early intervention for psychosis, and we really depend on people like you to who might be the first people that are trusted to hear about some of these experiences and to help students to get connected with support.
Thank you. And then, yep.
Should I introduce Harini? Harini Suresh, Dr. Suresh, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Harini. I'm a psychiatry resident at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center in Boston. I'm so happy to join, and I'll go into my project in a couple slides. Happy you guys could be here.
Great. And then Shira, would you mind unmuting and introducing yourself?
Yep. Hi, my name is Shira, and I use she, her pronouns. And today I am coming to you from Vancouver, Canada. And I'm the president of the Executive Board of Students with Psychosis.
Thank you. And I introduced myself. I'm Colette Potts, but I didn't tell you my role. I'm a clinician. I'm a family therapist, and I work on one of our family treatment studies. So I work with adolescents showing signs of risk for psychosis and their parents, which is super fun if you're into that, which I am. And I'm also director of recruitment. So I recruit for our studies, and then I'm also do outreach like this, presentations to just, especially a lot with clinicians, sharing new research with clinicians, letting them in on some of the things that we've discovered about early intervention, how it matters, what that looks like, and just trying to get you as comfortable as possible in your role when things like this come up. And thanks, Yana, for doing that. Just like with any research presentation, we're required to have a disclosure slide. We have nothing to disclose. Our work is supported by the National Institute of Mental Health, the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, which is called SAMHSA, and the Massachusetts Department of Mental Health. And we as speakers have no direct financial interest in this work. I'm going to hand it to Harini.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks for the introduction, Colette. My name is Harini. Again, I'm a resident at BI DMC in Boston. One of my passions within psychiatry is college student mental health. So I'm so appreciative of the work that you all do. With Michelle and Colette's help, I'm doing a study that looks at the attitudes, behaviors, familiarity of college mental health clinicians, specifically with students at risk for psychosis. I would so appreciate it if you could take 5 minutes to do my survey. I just took it and it took me 3. You can follow this QR code, and I'll also put the link to the survey here in the chat box. The study consists of a pre and post survey. The post I'll email out in about 3 months to all the registrants in this conference. A couple of things I want to add: there's no personal identifying information within the survey. And then I'm happy to answer any questions as you go along. You can put it in the chat box, chat me directly, and my email is also in the survey, and I can put that in the chat box as well.
So if it's okay with folks, we're just going to pause for a few minutes to give people a chance to fill out the survey If you decide you do not want to fill out the survey, you're welcome to get up and get a glass of water, use the bathroom, stretch, whatever you want to do. Get a few breaths of fresh air before the sun goes down if you're on, I think most of us are in Massachusetts. So, we will plan to email you the follow-up in 3 months. We won't know whether or not you filled out the first one. But if you do, and you get the email in 3 months, we'll appreciate getting your feedback afterwards, just to get a sense if this talk had an impact on your thinking in this area. Also, while folks are filling that out, I'll just make a plea. I really appreciate those of you who have your cameras on. It's always so nice to be able to see faces in a Zoom presentation. We will encourage you to actively participate. You can jump in by putting questions and comments in the chat. I think I have it set up that I should be able to see it, but also some of our team will help me notice things in the chat. We're hoping to leave some time at the end for some questions as well in discussion. And if at any point we don't get to, we'll try to also keep people muted if they're not talking to me as well. And then if for some reason we don't answer your question within the time that we have today before 4:30, feel free to reach out to us. Response to risk at bidmc.harvard.edu. We are happy to hear from you, and we'll do our very best to answer your question in email form as well. Okay, so I'm going to, folks can keep filling out that survey if they're not quite done with it, but I'm also going to mention our agenda as well and get started in terms of some of the things. So we've got a lot that we're planning to do. We want to talk about the importance of your role working within colleges, and it's so exciting to see folks from colleges all over Massachusetts, folks working in different roles. It's a really nice opportunity to connect. We're going to provide some information about recognizing signs of risk for psychosis. Really, the goal of our group is to help recognize the very earliest signs of psychosis in order to prevent symptoms from getting worse and help students stay on track in their education, in their lives. We'll talk about some strategies, some tools that you can use within your roles in the college to identify. We have a screening tool as well. We're going to talk about ways of supporting students at risk for psychosis. We'll tell you a little bit about some of the research programs that we have within BIDMC. And then I'm super excited to have the Students with Psychosis team talk a little bit about the amazing work they do in colleges all around the world. So I know that you are joining us at the end of a very busy day, the middle of a busy week. So just in case your attention wanders, which would not blame you if it does, I'm going to start with some of our take-home points. Some things that I hope that you'll remember. Honestly, if there's just one thing that you remember from this talk, I hope it's our email address and our website, because all of this information, lots and lots of information, is there. And we really want to be encouraging you to reach out to us and contact us with your questions about helping students that might be experiencing signs of risk for psychosis. We will make the recording and the slides available after the presentation. They will be posted on the Response to Risk website. So we want you to know that psychosis is treatable, especially when symptoms are recognized early. Psychosis is more common than you might realize. It's on a continuum that we're all on. You, in your role in colleges, may be the first person to recognize signs of risk. You might be the first person that a student trusts to talk with about some of these experiences. And so your role is incredibly important. And early symptoms of psychosis are often easy to dismiss. And so a lot of our work focuses on how do you recognize and respond to early signs in a way that can be supportive and reduce the likelihood of kind of additional suffering that can come when symptoms go untreated or when they're poorly understood. So just sort of, I found this picture. I thought this was a nice depiction of kind of what some of the students that you guys are working with might be, sort of what their lives are looking like right now, some of the things that you're balancing as college counselors and research or resident advisors and so forth. Oh, there's people screaming outside my window. Hopefully it's not too noisy for you guys. Your roles within college are incredibly important. You spend time directly with students. You might be the first point of contact with the mental health system for some students. So just reaching out for any sort of support, you guys might be at the forefront of that. And you uniquely understand the context of the academic and social environment that students are in and can play a really important role in supporting students that might be experiencing some of these challenges. So just to start things off a bit, I'm going to talk about a case example. This is mostly made up, but it's based on a number of students that I've worked with over the years within my roles within a clinical program and research programs. So Mohammed is an 18-year-old student. Within the last 6 months, his grades went from A's to D's. He quit the Ultimate Frisbee club team, told his counselor he believes his roommate is taking pictures without permission and spreading rumors about him. He worries that peers and teachers can see his thoughts, and wearing sunglasses help him feel safer. He mentioned that his father has been diagnosed with schizoaffective disorder. So first question that I have for the group, and we're going to try something called the chat waterfall. So what this means is that I'm going to ask you guys to write in the chat some thoughts on 3 questions, but I'm going to ask everyone to enter them at the same time. This reduces the likelihood that one person who feels really confident answers and then no one else wants to say anything. So my first question is, what do you think could be going on with Mohammed? So enter some thoughts into the chat, and then I will say 3, 2, 1, enter, and I want you to enter your responses. 3, 2, 1, enter. Okay. So I see a lot of people wrote psychosis, paranoia, could be anxiety and depression, trauma, substance use. Somebody wrote prodromal symptoms. We'll talk a little bit about what that means in a little bit. I appreciate somebody wrote, it's possible his roommate is taking photos. It's definitely worthwhile to consider that. We've made this case deliberately kind of vague because it's not always clear when somebody comes into the College Counseling Center and describes things like this, what's really going on. And so I really appreciate kind of thinking about, well, it could be that his roommate's taking pictures. So lots of things could be going on. Somebody wrote trauma of racism as well. Psychosis, struggling with how to connect with others, and also experiencing suspicions. Okay. So second question, what typically happens in your center when a student discloses concerns like this? So 3, 2, 1, enter. So I'm seeing further assessment, consult with a colleague, might be referral out of the college counseling center. Some folks are wondering if there's a referral there. I see the sort of emergency referral showing up in some cases. I think a lot of these are considerations that come up, and I think it really varies with how familiar a center might be or a clinician might be in working with folks who might be describing experiences like this as well. Does anybody want to say anything more about any of their comments related that they've entered into the chat so far? Feel free to unmute. Okay, folks are often cautious to talk, but eventually we will. Third question, what challenges might come up for supporting the student in the college setting? 3, 2, 1, enter. So I see challenges with access to care, building trust, systemic racism, lack of awareness for clinicians, judgment and stigma, isolation, dorm living and the sort of roommate challenges that are connected with this situation. Person might need accommodations for classes. They may have internalized stigma. Academics may be impacted. This is interesting. Colleges' ideas about what well enough looks like. Okay. And so folks have lots of ideas, and I think, someone like this, someone like Muhammad that is describing some experiences that could be a lot of things, but might sort of kind of get on the radar in terms of possibility of whether or not his mind is playing tricks on him. This would be someone that would be a very good fit for kind of, calling us, asking us for some thoughts and ideas. Like, this kind of where experiences aren't clear what's going on. He's bothered by some of these things. He's wondering if his mind is playing tricks on him, but he's also feeling pretty uncomfortable. These are the kinds of kind of symptoms or experiences that might be pretty common for folks that come into some of our programs. And on the other hand, if someone like this walked into your center, you called us, we asked them more questions, we might also decide that this is not something that has to do with psychosis, and try to direct you to some other resources that can help. But as I'm walking along, people can feel free to jump in with questions as well. All right, so a few words on psychosis. Psychosis in and of itself is not a diagnosis. A definition of psychosis that we often use is it's a set of symptoms that refers to a disturbance in mental state. They can make it hard to tell what's real and what's not real in certain situations. And psychosis can happen within the context of a mental illness like schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or depression, but people also can experience psychotic symptoms under the influence of certain drugs within the context of certain medical issues. With sleep deprivation, almost anybody can experience some psychosis kinds of experiences as well. So just to kind of give that context. Sometimes people have heard of the so-called positive and negative symptoms of psychosis. Really what those mean, I think the most common kinds of experiences delusions, kind of very fixed false beliefs that don't fit in with the person's culture, paranoia, having a hard time organizing thoughts, hallucinations, so hearing, seeing, smelling, tasting things that aren't really there. Our brain can play tricks on us to have those experiences. There's also a set of what are called negative symptoms, which can often go along with psychosis as well, which can be changes in showing emotion, energy, and drive for working on things. These are things that can show up as well. One thing that we really think about a lot within the response to risk research program at Beth Israel Deaconess Medical Center is that psychosis occurs on a continuum that everybody's on. So psychosis symptoms and these kinds of things occur in a lot of situations. So on the very mild end of the continuum might be some experiences that most people or most of the students that you see in your center may relate to. So these would not be considered clinically significant. These would be considered within the normative range, but thoughts like, I think my classmates don't like me and they talk about me behind my back. Okay. Some students will even say, I know I'm being paranoid, but what they're really talking about is just feeling, socially self-conscious and wondering if people don't like them. At a very high end, what we might call full psychosis, the experience may significantly interfere with daily life. A person might have 100% conviction that what's going on is real, and it makes a real impact on functioning. So a person might think there are spies in my school who are stealing my thoughts and putting them on the dark net. Okay. And then kind of in this middle area, we have what we might call moderate, and this term clinical high risk. We're going to talk more about what this means in a little bit. But in this kind of moderate area, folks might be experiencing some thoughts. Like, for example, my teacher might be reading my mind and recording me. And it's bothersome. It may have some impact on daily life, but the person is still wondering, is this their mind playing tricks on them? Is this really happening? This is the group of folks that in our research programs that we're very interested in connecting with, because these are folks that are experiencing symptoms that are concerning to them, but it's not clear that they have, they're often, you're kind of wondering, is this psychosis or is this something else? The prevalence of psychosis symptoms is a lot more common than people often realize. If we think about the total population of college students, about 17% will experience what we might call psychotic-like experiences. So these might be sort of on the continuum, wondering if your mind is playing tricks on you, might hear voices that don't really cause any real distress. About 17%, so almost 1 in 5, will experience something like that at some point. Doesn't mean that those folks, that many people, need treatment, need to come to our settings. It's just sort of a baseline to kind of recognize that there are a lot of folks who have experiences like this that may be that are more common than often people realize or talk about. About 3 in 100 people will develop a psychotic disorder, meaning kind of those full psychosis symptoms that are really disruptive in daily life and cause a lot of challenges. And then kind of about 7% will experience what we might call clinical high risk. So that moderate level of experiences that are causing some difficulty, they're bothersome, but the person's still wondering and kind of having insight and wondering whether or not what's happening for them, what's going on. And it's a kind of an opportunity for treatment. I see a couple of questions in the chat. Should we be differentiating clinical high risk when it is present in the context of severe OCD? Or is that still considered within the same high risk category? I will talk about OCD a little bit more in a bit, but there's definitely some overlap, but they're not exactly the same thing. Can you say more about the differential between social anxiety and risk for psychosis and what research says? I will also come back to that a little bit later in the talk. That's okay. Thank you for those great questions. Okay, so psychosis is treatable, early intervention can help. So we know that early intervention and more research around the world is supporting this, that early intervention is possible and it can promote recovery and prevent disability that can be associated with psychotic disorders. We know that half of all adult disorders start by age 14, 75% by age 24. So the folks that you're seeing in colleges, probably most of them are 24 or younger, and most of them are likely experiencing some of the earliest symptoms if they're going to eventually be developing adult sort of psychiatric conditions. These disorders often begin with mild, very easy to dismiss symptoms, but we know that early treatment is effective for youth at risk for psychosis. This is a bit of a complicated slide, but down here we've got sort of along the bottom, we have age. Up here, we have kind of the person's health status. And in a typical course of psychotic disorder, let's say schizophrenia, most people will have pretty, the majority of folks that develop schizophrenia early on in life, you won't see a lot of symptoms that folks will see early on. But around adolescence, early adulthood, folks may start to experience some changes. When those are later followed by a first psychotic episode, there's often a sharp decline in functioning that happens at that point. And unfortunately, often that first point of contact with treatment for psychosis for many young people winds up being in an emergency room or emergency setting. One of the goals of early intervention work is to prevent that, is to respond to some of the earlier symptoms and to provide support that might prevent the need for emergency intervention needing to happen. And one of the things that we're really trying to prevent with early intervention is this kind of up and down cycle that you see here, where most folks who have a first episode of psychosis will have good recovery with treatment, but if they go on to have a second episode, third episode, it can really have an impact on the person's life. And even though we know that the sooner folks connect with treatment, often the better the outcomes are, the average adolescent experiences psychosis for 18.7 months before treatment. And 60% of psychotic disorders wind up getting diagnosed for the first time in crisis settings, like in an inpatient unit or an emergency department. And Shira from the SWP team and others will sort of talk about experiences that may overlap or be different with this as well. But that experience of the first time that really psychosis or these kinds of symptoms are recognized being in an emergency room is a very difficult thing. And this can lead to, delays in treatment can make it harder to respond to treatment. We know that delays in treatment are associated with increased risk for suicide. The longer that someone goes without being able to function at their best in school, living independently on their own, connecting with friends, the harder it is to get back into that. So you, in your roles in college counseling centers, might be the first to see some of these early warning signs. And I think one of the things that's most important to know is that recovery is likely with timely help. Most people who are experiencing these kinds of symptoms will recover with the right support. So one more chat waterfall situation. I'm curious what people think. Why does it take so long for folks to get support for signs of risk for psychosis that might be causing distress and challenges? So type in your thoughts in the chat. 3, 2, 1. Go. Afraid to ask, shame, fear of judgment, stigma. I see stigma a lot, not really knowing about resources that are available, embarrassment, shame, financial barriers, not really being able to recognize the problem, worry that people won't believe them, they don't know who to trust. Somebody wrote clinician fear as well. Sometimes clinicians are reluctant to even ask about these kinds of symptoms, especially if they don't feel super comfortable with assessing for psychosis, especially if they are not really sure about what resources are available. All right, so thank you for your thoughts. I think that most of these things that I came up with were added, but I'll also add mine. So stigma, college students, and is sort of the time when folks are most at risk for developing psychosis. They might not have a lot of contact with medical system. Also, this history of racism and oppression by medical providers, lack of privilege, lack of comfort with bringing up what may be really kind of embarrassing, hard to talk about symptoms or experiences, not knowing who to trust. And, I appreciate someone had brought this up, but this sort of clinician reluctance of lack of comfort with assessing for psychosis. One of the things I really like the most about talking with college counselors is just sharing the message of hope. Because a lot of times people who don't have a lot of experience with working with people with psychosis, assessing for psychosis, often will have this sense of, well, if these symptoms are going on, this person is just doomed to a difficult life and will never recover. And that's, something that can get in the way of a person getting the support they need that can really help with recovery. So just a few words on identifying and responding to signs of clinical high risk for psychosis. I think one thing it's useful to keep in mind, most people who develop psychosis will experience some other mental health concerns earlier in life. Many have actually gotten treatment for other mental health concerns. These can include changes in mood, thinking, and when these changes are followed by psychosis, the period that came before that is known as the prodrome to psychosis. It basically means beginning of an illness, beginning of psychosis. Signs of clinical high risk for psychosis can be reliably identified. And there's increasing research that supports that, early treatment, early support can make a difference for folks that might be experiencing signs of clinical risk for psychosis. These are folks that, are experiencing symptoms that are causing challenges, maybe causing distress for the person, likely will lead to some treatment seeking and support from mental health professionals, and put them at increased risk for developing psychosis. However, one thing I'll point out is we have this interview, a specialized assessment called the structured interview for psychosis risk syndromes. When folks are seen as being at risk on that assessment, about 10 to 25% will develop a psychotic disorder in the next 2 to 3 years. So even, you don't have to be from MIT in order to have the math expertise to recognize that that is way less than 100%. So a lot of the kids that we see within our programs are distressed by their experiences, but they may or may not develop into psychosis. But more and more research is suggesting that getting intervention for the concerns that the person is bringing up can make a difference in terms of their trajectory over the long term. So just getting back to this slide, kind of here, recognizing and responding to clinical high risk for psychosis. This is where our programs are trying to intervene, kind of recognizing some signs and symptoms that suggest a person's at risk for developing. They often are experiencing some attenuated or psychosis-like symptoms that aren't totally clear. And our goal is to provide some support that might help to prevent those symptoms from getting worse. Here's some examples of what that can mean in different areas of symptoms. I won't go into this slide in super detail, but of what the sort of continuum between kind of like a minimally or normative range of an experience, what would be considered full psychosis and what would be considered possibly at the clinical high risk level, right? So an example in perceptual abnormalities, you know, occasionally hearing your name, someone call your name, it's not bothersome. That's a pretty common experience that folks will report. Somebody who sees maybe at least once a week, figures out of the corner of their eyes or hears a voice they know isn't real, it's bothering them. That would be pretty typical for folks that might be kind of coming into our center. And someone who's hearing a clear voice, convinced is a powerful deity that has the ability to control their actions in the future, that would be kind of more on that higher end of the continuum. There is a lot of research going on right now on treatments that can help for folks that are experiencing signs of risk for psychosis. Here's an example of some of the things that have some preliminary support. Some of these kinds of treatment research studies are happening within our center as well, or that our programs are part of. So there's some support for things like cognitive behavioral therapy, kind of coordinated, integrated, specialized treatment, family-focused treatment, being able to make a difference. There are some studies using antipsychotic medications. These are generally not thought of being the first line of treatment for clinical high risk for psychosis. Well, often one of the advantages of early detection and intervention is sometimes we will start with some of the kind of behavioral supports like cognitive behavioral therapy, family therapy can sometimes reduce the need for medication if symptoms, the person kind of is able to maintain kind of insight about what's real and what's not real. So this slide also kind of demonstrates that, you know, we identify really early symptoms. There may be more opportunities to use family and individual therapy, school support, skills training. When symptoms continue to cause distress, even with these, or they get to the point of full psychosis, almost always medication is going to be a necessary and first line of treatment that happens in order to be able to benefit from the other things. But folks are doing more research on that when you intervene early and somebody is still wondering if their mind is playing tricks on them, they're concerned about themselves, that we have more opportunities to kind of use non-medication treatments to try to help as well. So in your roles, you can talk with kids about psychosis and help by recognizing early signs. So here's a list of some of the maybe some common signs and symptoms that might show up in folks that are at risk for psychosis. You'll notice that some of these are incredibly non-specific to psychosis and that are probably present in just about every student that you're seeing in the counseling centers right now. So these ones here on the left, dropping grades, trouble concentrating. These are things that are, you know, you're going to likely see a lot. The ones in the sort of darker purple might be a little bit more specific to psychosis, but again, can occur as a part of a number of different kinds of things. If these kinds of things show up, it can be helpful to do a little bit more screening around risk for psychosis, especially if a person, if you know they have a relative, close relative with psychosis, that can also be something to keep in mind. Here's some examples. Just curious, maybe a show of hands, or who in their current jobs do you routinely in your center kind of ask about signs of risk for psychosis as part of a standard intake to the counseling center? See a few hands. Okay. Yeah, I'm actually seeing more hands than I have in the past. Not necessarily a super ton, but often psychotic symptoms are not fully included in a standard college counseling center intake. And sometimes people are a little unsure about how to ask. I think the most standard questions people often learn are something like, do you ever hear noises or voices other people can't hear? Or do you have any unusual beliefs that other people don't have? And I don't love those questions because there's a little bit of a, I don't know, they sound a little judgy to me. Like, are you having some unusual beliefs? I mean, I don't know, like, how am I supposed to know that? There's an interview called The Skid that starts the psychosis section by saying, now I'm going to ask you about some unusual experiences that people sometimes have. And I skip that because I think that's silly. I don't think these experiences are as unusual as people say. And it's almost like saying you're unusual or weird if you say yes to these things. But these are more open-ended questions that can be helpful. Do you ever feel like your mind is playing tricks on you? You ever concerned about whether you've something experienced as real or imaginary? You feel like you're more sensitive to sounds or hear things that you're not sure other people can hear? These are just a little bit more open-ended. Some people will say yes to these questions and they're not experiencing psychosis, but you want to kind of open a door to be able to describe some of the experiences that people are having, and that they will tell you if some of these things are bothering them. This is a screening questionnaire called the Prodrome Questionnaire 16. It's a series of true-false questions. Here's a link to that. Maybe someone from my team can put the link in the chat as well. But some people find this useful as a screening tool because it's just 16 true-false questions. They ask about a lot of common experiences that can show up in someone who might be experiencing signs of risk for psychosis. And it can be useful as just a tool for starting a conversation about it. If the person answers true to an item, then they write how much it bothers them. Okay, so I want to make sure we stay reasonably on time. So one of the things that we often do when folks call us at the Response to Risk program is we ask some questions to try to get a sense of some of these often tricky differential diagnoses, things that are showing up that can overlap with psychosis risk. They can also mimic psychosis risk or be the thing that's a better explanation for what's going on with a college student at some point. So we often do this when folks call us to get a better sense of whether coming into our center for an assessment would be a fit. And then sometimes we're doing this when we do our specialized assessment to get a sense of whether these things are going on. There's definitely a good deal of overlap, also in OCD, obsessive compulsive disorder. Folks may feel like there's a connection between things that they're not sure is real or not. And so there's some overlap with that as well. It is possible for folks to have kind of overlapping obsessive compulsive disorder and signs of risk for psychosis. So, for example, somebody might have a concern that's very common for OCD, that they're having urges to harm a loved one, or they're having images that go through their mind about people being harmed. And that in and of itself, is something that can show up as part of OCD. That person might, on top of that experience, also hear a voice telling them that they're bad, that other people know what they're thinking. And that would make us think a little bit more about potentially there being an overlap with psychosis. Those are kinds of questions we ask. Late onset ADHD doesn't exist, but a lot of times folks that are in the process of developing or experiencing psychotic symptoms will notice changes in their attention. So sometimes they will show up at health services asking for a prescription for ADHD medications because they can't read as well as they used to, or pay attention in class the way they used to. And I put that here because for folks that might be having changes in their attention because of psychosis, the ADHD medications might actually make their symptoms worse. And so sometimes, just the screening for other experiences that might relate to psychosis or family history can be helpful. Trauma experiences are very common amongst folks who experience signs of risk for psychosis and psychosis, and also the experience of, hearing the voice of an abuser. Other kinds of things can happen as part of trauma. So we try to get a sense of the timing on that. Use of street drugs like cannabis and other kinds of things can definitely have an impact on complicating symptoms as well. And so we try to get a sense of whether the experiences are happening only when the person is kind of actively experiencing the effects of the substance, whether it also sometimes happens when they're sober as well. The timing of that is something that we try to work out. Also, we're really thinking very carefully about person's culture, subculture, the environment they live in, the experience of racism, structural racism on the person when we're thinking about kind of certain, beliefs and ideas that show up that could be misinterpreted as being a psychosis, but that are actually kind of part of subculture that makes sense within their system. So a few things to keep in mind. If you are working with a student who trusts you and tells you about some experiences they're having that might relate to psychosis, please consider responding with hope. Thank the person for trusting you. Let them know there's help. The experiences are more common than you might think, and that early intervention can make a difference. And we're going to be providing some information about sources of connection to programs and resources that can help. I'm going to turn things over to Colette to talk just a couple minutes about some of our programs, and then we will be hearing from Shira from Students with Psychosis.
Thanks, Michelle. So if you think you might have a student in your midst that could be a good fit, or you're not sure, we would encourage you to give us a call. And by us, I mean me. When we say email or call to talk with a clinician, that person is me. That's my email. That's my phone number. And we will just talk about what it is that you're seeing and talk about, next steps. I would have questions. You might know the answer to them, maybe you don't, but we would just kind of talk about what it is that you are worried about, and just talk about next steps. Some of our available treatments or some of our available studies that are really helpful for first college students. The family treatment study, that's family therapy. We do have some college students who want to engage in family therapy with their parents or caregivers back at home. But primarily, it's some of these other studies that are more maybe relevant to college kids. But they would be eligible for a family treatment study, which we said is really effective for clinical high risk. We have a school or work coaching study to kind of beef up some academic supports. So on college campuses, you have access to, supporting students in an academic way, which is really cool. Some of the other one, the monitoring and cognitive assessment, brain scan, the ProNet, brain energy. These are studies that could offer pretty good compensation for participation. So that's the other thing we know about college students is they always need money. So that would be a good opportunity for students. But the wonderful thing about all of these studies is that each one of them comes with a free comprehensive evaluation. So for even to determine eligibility, we would take a student that you brought to our attention who agreed to participate in one of our studies. We'd give them a full evaluation just to assess their risk for psychosis. It's free, there's no insurance involved, and it's like the best gig in town because we don't have a waiting list. I think we might be the only people in the state that don't have a waiting list. Which is really good because we make this case for early intervention and then people are just stuck on waiting lists or they can't even do that. So this is something that we're able to offer that we want to communicate to as many people as possible. Yes, and they can be done remotely or in person. We do a lot of this remotely.
I saw that question from Ashley that says, what if a student is experiencing evidence of psychosis rather than signs of risk? Would they still be eligible? For most of the studies that we're involved in directly, if it was clear, we want you to call us either way, because making that determination of, is it full psychosis, is it signs of risk, can be tricky. For most of the studies that Colette was just talking about, signs of risk is what we're looking for, but we can do our best to connect you with resources that can treat early psychosis as well, or full psychosis.
Mm-hmm. That's the other thing. People find that these consultation calls are really helpful. Most of them actually don't end up with adolescents in our study. We might make other recommendations, or if we thought it was the first episode, we might, like Michelle said, we might refer you to other places that we know about. But we very rarely say like, we can do nothing for you. At least we can just kind of have that professional consultation and point you in a direction. Take home points. Say, oh, we're already here again. I feel like we just did these. Like Michelle said in the beginning, psychosis is treatable, especially when symptoms are recognized early. Psychosis is more common than you might think, certainly more common than some adolescents think. It's on a continuum. We're all on it. You might be the first person to recognize signs of risk in your role, and early symptoms are often easy to dismiss. And Selena's question, do you offer consultation with staff or faculty even without referring a student for a study? Yep. And I'm going to talk about that too. We offer consultation, free consultation.
Sandra also asked, can you walk us through the process, how you present this resource to a potential student? So again, feel free to call us and we'll talk that through with you, because some students, it's not a one size fits all kind of thing. Some students really want help and don't want to do research, and we can tell you about opportunities for things that are not research. Some students are really iffy about it, but they're kind of interested in research, and that can be a way in. So, we can talk with you about how might be the best way to present it to the student that's going to be useful. Sometimes we even have people, if they know they're going to be meeting with the student on Friday at 3, we might kind of set up a plan that, on Friday at 3, they talk with the student about it. The student's interested. They could call Colette together. She could talk to them, right in the session. Like, that's all possible.
Yeah, I encourage you to talk to me. We've done enough of these where these calls don't surprise us anymore. Not yet, anyway. I'd love to be surprised though. And students, there's always some element of what we can offer that is useful to your work. Yeah. Some students really respond positively to like wanting to be part of research, just this sort of like, I would like to help others. I think it's really beautiful for young people just to be interested in helping people who come after them. Some want brain scans, pictures of the brain. They're worried that something might be going wrong up there and they want to see an image of it. We have studies that offer that. This is our website, and to the right is a snapshot of a flyer that I made that just talks about our consultation calls, things that we can talk about. And my phone number is not on there, but it's on the flyer if you were to print it, and you can print it and you can put it on your bulletin board or somewhere near your desk. It has just kind of like the signs and symptoms that were Michelle presented on a previous slide, just kind of a handy dandy resource. And it will encourage you to call me, as I'm doing right now. Call me, email me. There's all kinds of other stuff on our email. There's other psycho-ed materials. There's flyers for our studies that it'd be wonderful if you could download those and put those in your vestibule or your lobby or your waiting room. Especially the brain energy, the ones that offer some pretty good compensation, but come with comprehensive exams or comprehensive evaluations. And then there's all kinds of other stuff on there, like resources for clinicians or for students or for parents. We try to update that as much as possible because there's always new stuff coming out. Yes. Michelle, do you want to, Shira? So Shira, you did introduce yourself in the beginning. Do you want to take it away?
Awesome. Yes, it's my pleasure. I know you sent me a bio, Shira, and I don't have it in front of me right now. So if you wouldn't mind introducing yourself, but I'll just start by saying I had the absolute pleasure of seeing a outstanding panel by the Students with Psychosis team that happened at a conference that we ran in Boston at Northeastern just last week. And I was so moved and amazed by the wonderful work they do that I reached out and said, I've got this college talk happening next week. Will you join us? And they said yes, and they're amazing. And I'm so glad to have you here to tell us a little bit about yourself and the amazing work of Students with Psychosis.
Thank you so much, and thank you so much for having me and my team here today. So my name is Shira, and I use she, her pronouns, and I am coming to you today from Vancouver, Canada. I'm the president of the executive board of Students with Psychosis, a 501c3 nonprofit that empowers student leaders and advocates worldwide through community building and collaboration. Today, I'm going to share a little bit of my story with you, as well as how Students with Psychosis has impacted me. I am 4. I climb upstairs to go to sleep, but there are skeletons everywhere. My parents say I have a big imagination. Later, I'm laying in bed and I've just woken up and it's the middle of the night. I feel a snake wrapping its long, scaly body around my leg, and I know if I move, it will bite me, so I try to stay perfectly still. It bites me anyway. I scream. I am 6. I am the skinniest one at school. Everyone tells me so, complimenting me for my smallness. I smile, soak up the praise. I check my wrists whenever I remember to, making sure that they are still small, that I am still the thinnest. In the mirror, I admire my sharp bones that stick through my skin, but it's never enough. I need them to pierce through completely before I'm satisfied. I pretend I'm not hungry until I lose my hunger cues. I decide I'm not human, therefore I don't need food. I am 8. I pretend I'm real, but I'm not. Nothing is, and it terrifies me. I float up and out of my body all of the time, watching myself from far away. I tell my friend, and she says I need God to save me. I pray and pray for God to make me real, but he doesn't listen. I am 11. I hear the words mental illness for the first time, even though I have been experiencing all sorts of symptoms for my entire life. Everything from anxiety to extreme moods to psychosis and dissociation. I never once thought of reaching out for help. I didn't always even know something was wrong, and when I didn't have the words to describe what I was experiencing. I am 13. My moods flip between extremes from minute to minute. I'm on top of the world, a god, and then I'm thinking of how I can die, crying, and then I'm screaming at everyone in the room, dizzy with rage, and then I'm laughing again. I'm eating so little that I have seizures. I hallucinate ants crawling under my skin, in my brain. I am 18. I am more disconnected from reality than ever. I've been hiding under my desk for days, waiting to be punished for surely killing so many people. Later, in the back of a police car, I'm laughing hysterically. On my way to the hospital yet again, texting everyone I know that I'm getting married, completely unaware of where I am. I am 20, and for the first time in my life, I decide to take treatment seriously. It is the hardest thing that I have ever done. I'm getting better, but I still feel so alone. There are only a few people I trust to talk to about what I'm going through, and they don't understand. I'm 21. I find Students with Psychosis and join as a student leader. And for the first time, I don't feel so alone anymore. It wasn't until I found this community that being open about my mental health had ever even occurred to me. But once I saw it was possible, I knew that's what I wanted. I wasn't ready yet, though. I wasn't even comfortable with sharing my name in meetings at the time. I am 22. I become president of the executive board of Students with Psychosis and talk publicly about my mental health to thousands of people. It took a long time and it wasn't easy, But one day I decided enough was enough, and I didn't have the energy to hide my struggles from the world anymore. I opened up, and it changed my life. Today, I am managing my symptoms better than ever. I'm doing things that no one would have believed a few years ago. I advocate because I want people to know that they are not alone. I advocate because I want people to have words for their experiences, and I advocate because I don't want people to feel like they need to hide from the world. Before I joined Students with Psychosis, I was newly diagnosed, and I felt like I had to give up on all my dreams. My future looked bleak. People living with psychosis can't do things like go to school or work. That's what I was told, and that's what I thought. Students with Psychosis changed the way I saw myself and others living with psychosis, and we are continuing to challenge how the world sees people living with psychosis. When you think of psychosis, do you think of a group of people working together as an effective team or faces of leadership? I certainly didn't. At Students with Psychosis, we put our community at the decision-making table with 100% of our executive board members and staff living with psychosis and having participated in our student leadership or internship programs. Together, we make over 160 hours of monthly virtual programming possible with at least 5 facilitated hours each day, providing a safe space for our community members to come together through video, audio, and text-based programming. Attending these virtual meetings, such as peer support group, and hearing others relate to my experiences was and continues to be one of the most influential factors in my healing journey. And I know I'm not alone in this sentiment. There is so much stigma and shame surrounding psychosis, and by breaking that down for each other, we are building our community up. Sharing my story has given me back my sense of purpose and my passion in life, and I could not be more grateful. In our mission to expand mental health advocacy to ensure psychosis is included in the conversation, we offer memberships to students and advocates with lived experience free of cost to ensure accessibility. We recognize the importance of allies in this goal, offering free memberships to faculty, as well as paid membership tiers for mental health professionals, students pursuing a mental health degree, creatives, and friends and family members. Broadening mental health awareness to include psychosis is so important, especially for students. If there's one thing that I want people to know about psychosis, it is that it is not a death sentence. People living with psychosis are just as human as everybody else. When you empower people living with psychosis, you empower one of today's most misunderstood and vulnerable communities. We help give people with psychosis a voice, and you should too. Thank you.
Shira, thank you so much. I hope you see all the applause and the emotion in folks' eyes when they're seeing you speak. It's so amazing. I'm wondering if other members of the SWT team would mind just kind of shouting out, saying hello, and also if someone can put the website for SWP into the chat so folks can check out just your wonderful website and learn more about how they can share this incredible resource with their school communities.
I'm Seamus. Excuse me, terrible time to start talking. I'm Seamus. I'm also a member of the SWP team.
Seamus, maybe you can just call on someone since I might not know everybody who's there.
Let's see, where's Cecilia at?
I'm here. Hey there. My name is Cecilia Miguel, and I'm also a member of Students with Psychosis. Calling on now, the other Cecilia from Students with Psychosis, Cecilia Joyce.
Hi, I'm Cecilia Joyce. I'm Operations Director and also Treasurer. And I am on the Executive Board of Students with Psychosis as well.
Hello.
How about Abby?
Sorry.
Hi everyone, I'm Abby. I'm on the executive board for Students with Psychosis and I'm logging in from New Zealand. I call on Amika.
Thank you all for sharing. Hello, everyone. My name is Emeka Chima. I'm the Executive Board Secretary for the nonprofit Students with Psychosis.
Awesome, thank you. Did we get everybody from the SWTP team? Great, wonderful. So I want to just open things up for questions. We have a little bit of time for folks to ask questions for all of our presenters. One thing I'll show, just because I'll probably forget unless I show it right now. So here's the Students with Psychosis. There's just a couple of additional resources that are coming soon that I wanted to tell people about. So these are not active yet, but there's something called the Massachusetts Behavioral Health Helpline, which they just made an announcement. They included, this is going to be a single phone number that the goal that Massachusetts has is that this will provide an opportunity to call a single phone number and get connected with mental health help broadly. And that behavioral health helpline will be connecting with a new program called Empath, Massachusetts Psychosis Access and Triage Hub, which will be a program specifically around helping folks who are looking for treatment for psychosis. So just to know, like if we have your email addresses, we'll probably send you about information when these information about these resources when they become available. But I'm going to stop the share and just encourage folks to either write their questions, their comments in the chat, or to raise their hand, or even to just to speak out and unmute themselves. While I'm waiting for folks to be brave, I hope that Shira, you've been able to see all these just wonderful comments in the chat from folks just very inspired by your story.
Hi, Michelle, it's Maureen Resendez. Thank you so much for doing this again. Every time I attend, I learn something new. I'm wondering about resources for clinicians who want more training, either, early career clinicians or later career clinicians. What would you recommend?
That is great. I'm going to think about that. If my sort of folks from my team can keep track of this question, I will send some to the whole group. Some of the things that there's something called the Mental Health Technology Transfer Center. I'm going to look for the link to that. We've actually developed, there are a lot of actually, if you look on our response to risk website, www.responsetorisk.org, we have taped trainings of a variety of sorts related to some things like, we did a series last year, kind of a drop-in session for school clinicians that were working in high schools and middle schools. Some of that might be relevant. We've done some trainings on acceptance and commitment therapy for psychosis. We have a whole series on kind of culturally competent care for early psychosis, and also a series that we did as part of MHTTC that's kind of a basics of coordinated specialty care series, which actually I know Joey, who's on my team, is around, and Isabel, so they might be able to drop a link in the chat for that series. So that's a series of 7 talks about different areas of coordinated specialty care for early psychosis, and every talk is co-presented by a individual who works in the area and has expertise from their work, as well as somebody who has expertise that comes from lived experience as well.
I'd love to say an out loud and verbal thank you, especially to the students that are with us today. This felt really informative and inspirational, and I will definitely be looking into more information about students with psychosis. And what's going through my mind is even facilitating speakers to campus. I know so many of our students struggle with psychotic symptoms that impact their lives in a chronic and persistent way. And Shira, sort of like your messaging, I know it can feel so alone for people, and also hearing messages about lived experience directly, I think can be really comforting. And maybe a question, but no worries if people don't have answers to it. But sometimes I really like community and strengths-based models of working with any diagnosis, but that includes experiences of psychosis. But sometimes I want to be careful about towing the line between talking with people about the gifts that they also receive from their symptoms, while honoring the pain that comes with them as well. And I'd be curious if you have any input experience with that, if that's something you have found helpful toward recovery and treatment or not as much. Thank you again.
Thank you so much for your kind words and for the question. And I think that's a really great question. Personally, in my experience, I've found being told that I'm more empathetic helpful. I've been found being told that I am resilient. That can be helpful for me. I find it less helpful if somebody's telling me that my illness is a gift, because I don't feel that way personally, but I know that's different for everybody's individual experience.
I appreciate your honesty with that. That's exactly what I was hoping for. Thanks, Shira. And I know I'm not asking anyone to represent the experiences of all students, but it's so great to hear this perspective as well.
And I see someone asked a question, do you offer support groups for college students? I think that's a question for the SWP team rather than us.
Yep, so we have, you can sign up for free if you're a college student on our website, and you don't have to have an official diagnosis or anything like that. And there's always no pressure to share anything, but we're always here to listen. And we offer, I believe, 7 or 8 different kinds of meetings every week. And you don't have to go to the peer support meeting at first if that feels overwhelming. You can go to something like a creative meeting or a video hangout where you just get to talk about how your day is going.
We also have some amazing feedback from our students via live chat. So we use the Discord channel. If you're not familiar with Discord, it's a social media channel based on chatting. That's why we call it the live chat. It takes place two times a day. One's midnight to 1 a.m. and noon to 1 p.m. And that's just a safe space to share whatever on the students' minds. And it's a nice way to decompress and express whatever feeling or whatever's going on.
Awesome. Does anyone else have questions or comments, things they want to mention? Well, thank you so much, all of you, for spending your afternoon with us, talking about this really important topic. Special thank you to Shira and the SWP team. Please, Giannis is going to put a link to, for those that are wanting to get CE credits for your attendance today, there's a post conference survey to fill out. So, oh, that's right. Yes, I got a link. Dr. Suresh Harini was going to potentially at the end, I forgot, we can share some data if folks are interested from the survey that folks filled out at the very beginning of the talk today. If anyone's just kind of interested in what that looks like, we'll share some of that data. But for folks that are filling out the CE survey, just remember to fill that out. But also you do need to register on the CE website as well. So you need to do those two things to get your CE credits, and then hopefully you should get those in about within 6 weeks, hopefully sooner as well. Harini, do you want to share your screen and just kind of share? We're going to try to figure out the survey is kind of neat, so it'll allow you to see some things pretty quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you all who got a chance to participate in the survey. Just going to scroll through some potentially interesting stats from those who did participate, which looks like to be about 49 people. Looks like an even spread kind of between counselors, psychologists, and social workers. A lot of people have been practicing between 5 and 10 years, some 10 to 20, and even 3 over 20 years. How did individuals with a concern for full or a risk for psychosis come to your attention? A lot, the majority seems to be through self-referral, which is interesting, followed by, I guess it would be clinician referral after that. A lot of people, if they had seen a student with a concern for psychosis, referred to another clinician or service. And then a lot of people sought consultation from others similarly. And it looks like a lot from campus mental health staff. The acuity seems to have driven most people to refer or consult others. Many people screen nearly all students, clients, patients for mental health concerns, but this is specifically for psychosis, and it seems like maybe a little bit less, but still a lot. I think this one is pretty interesting. Your level of confidence in providing care for individuals with psychosis seems to be lower than with these other common mental health issues that one encounters on college campuses, especially. So I definitely hope, the talk today was educational in that regard. And then over here, we have just an agree or disagree, but specifically pertaining to treatment available, maybe structured screening tools like the PQ16 that was put in the chat. So hopefully, that was helpful to a lot of you today. Yeah, and I will be looking at the post survey in a couple months and hopefully work on developing some sort of resource. But thank you all again for participating. I'll stop the share.
Wonderful. Well, I can hang out for a little bit if folks have any lingering questions, but also just want to thank you all for attending today. I think I'm going to stop the recording at this point and hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And you will hear from us with the post survey in a few months, as well as when the recording becomes available and the slides and all those kinds of things as well. And don't hesitate to reach out to us with any questions or thoughts, especially if you have a student that you're working with that you think could benefit from getting an evaluation with us.